Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to the Horus Heresy, the Unremembered Empire Part 2. This is a big ol' little dense book right here, probably a three-parter even. So let's delve right back into it with Alexis Pollux having a chat with Warsmith D'Antioch. I think it's probably good that they were located a few billion miles apart from one another, considering Alexis's recent interactions with the Iron Warriors. He is not particularly overjoyed to find D'Antioch in charge of the beacon. As Alexis put it, the single most important asset to Macragge's defense, in the hands of an Iron Warrior. Yes, indeed. But D'Antioch reassures him that he has switched sides properly. He will even share with Pollux all of the old secret lore, all of the craft, all of the strategies and tactics that the Iron Warriors had kept to themselves through the ages and never given to anyone else. Pollux points out that D'Antioch is still wearing his Iron Warrior's mask, shaped like the icon of his legion, and suggests that this might be a somewhat obvious, one might even say, sign of where his true allegiances lie. But D'Antioch, of course, rejects that immediately, laughs it off almost. To him, the mask is more of a reminder of just how far he has fallen in some ways, and more importantly, how far his once brothers have fallen. A constant reminder of what the Iron Warriors once were, of how they were iron, but now nothing more than traitors. That's interesting, certainly, though the more proper reason is probably the fact that if D'Antioch were to remove that mask, he might fall over dead, as, well, he is essentially crippled due to the effects of the Hrud, who have now left him with a permanent heavy limp and cough. Even to the point where Guilliman has seen fit to allow him to bring a chair to their hour-long meetings. How kind of Guilliman. Oh, I see you there, cripple. You may sit. Very nice. I laugh. I make a bit of fun of it, but it does make a certain sense. I mean, hell, D'Antioch himself would almost certainly never have suggested it due to his own pride. And Guilliman, again, he's a little bit more human than some of his brothers and wouldn't like for the Iron Warrior to stand on protocol. Anywho, Pollux decides that, alright, he'll give it a shot. He'll read through all of D'Antioch's reports, he'll look through his suggestions, and he will of course be keeping a close eye on him, just in case. But for now, he will tolerate his presence. Not that he really has all that much of a choice, but again, details. And we have more pressing matters to discuss, don't we? Oh yes, the lion! Oh my. As Guilliman says, of all the loyal sons, why did it have to be him? He talked about in the previous part that he would happily hand over the reins of power on Macragge to anyone. Well, anyone. Quotation marks. The lion. He gives a rather interesting impression of him. He claims that he's always viewed Lionel Johnson as a little bit too shady, perhaps. Secretive. Sly is the word specifically that Guilliman uses. See, on the one hand, I get it. The lion certainly has his secrets, as we know. But, I don't know. The lion has always come across as almost a little naive in a way up until this point. Like, he is not the manipulative sort. I certainly wouldn't use the word sly. Even the secrets that he has kept from people like Master Amiel or his closest advisors back in the Order, it wasn't due to any kind of malice or necessarily even secretiveness. It came from a genuine belief that this was the kind of knowledge you really should not know. And I suspect that comes from a instinctive nature as well, as we are told again and again. The lion's brilliance comes from his instincts. Like, he knows what is best just automatically, kinda. He comes up with a battle plan not due to some kind of learned knowledge or necessarily even experience. It comes to him quite naturally. He's a virtuoso in this field. And so again, sly. It feels, I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly nitpicky here, but I really don't think that word fits the lion very well right now. It fits the lion quite well in 40k, sure, but this version of the lion, feels like a little bit too much in the way of author knowledge, basically informing Guilliman's opinion here. I can see why Guilliman would kind of dislike the lion, because again, Guilliman is all certainty, mathematical ideas, knowledge. He knows tactics. And so I can definitely see how he might have an adverse reaction to someone who hasn't really read the books, yet somehow mysteriously has the practical knowledge. The two are, in many ways, radical opposites after all. Anywho. Guilliman does, however, nevertheless, realize that coming in at the head of a force of 20,000 archangels, he just gained himself an incredibly good ally. So long as ally is the correct word, anyways. Now, if we're going to talk about someone who really fits the term sly, we move on to rejoin John. You know, John. That John. Although he's calling himself All now. Presumably he's taken up the role of All Person after the whole debacle on Calth, so that he can infiltrate Maclag and do whatever nonsense a perpetual that seems to now be working against the Cabal does. He might also be the reason why that other Cabal agent is here. Anywho, he's in amongst the refugees, waiting to be let into the proper welcoming centers. But the Maclag guards are keeping a close eye on them, and they're carrying out extensive screening programs before anyone are left in to the proper civitas. Which, again, considering everything that happened at Calth, is probably a pretty darn good idea. Not that the security measures are any problems for Grammaticus, of course, who simply just wanders through all of it, using his bluffing abilities and the occasional little touch of psychic powers here and there as well, to keep himself, unnoticeable, or at the very least uninteresting, to all those who would otherwise be asking questions as to why a refugee suddenly walked on to the main Strategium deck. I do love Grammaticus. He's a funny little lad, isn't he? Now, there is an interesting side note here as well, in that Grammaticus can feel the light of the Pharaohs, and he describes it as an old light, a dirty light. One activated long, long before humanity, and even, tellingly, long, long before the Eldar. Oh me, oh my. Pretty much everyone probably knows about the interesting little tidbit that happens at the end of this book. Wink, wink. But if you don't, I shan't ruin the surprise just yet, but, in my opinion, it pretty much solidifies the theory that this light is something created by the Old Ones. In fact, John Grammaticus pretty much even outright states it by saying that it allowed for these things to cross the gulf between the stars. So yes, in all due likelihood, this is almost certainly some form of Old One tech, a means of travel, and specifically a means of traveling from one galaxy to the other, which has a lot of interesting implications too. Anywho, returning to the immediate present, John Grammaticus is here on an assassination mission for his alien masters. Even has a little bit of a complaint about how they are his alien masters, and yet he's also like, but for how much longer? When will I betray them? And, well, he has already, hasn't he? I mean, the whole thing with all? That was not Cabal business, was it? I'm a little bit confused, because I'm pretty sure he's already turned, but, to be fair, it's been a while since I got through the Horus Heresy again, so maybe my memory is simply failing me. Entirely possible. He does figure out a hole in the security net, and begins his journey down to Macragge. And in that endeavor, he is not the only one. Grammaticus had also noted that the Ultramarines and the Dark Angels were greeting each other with enthusiasm, but care as well, as none of the Dark Angel ships were allowed to anchor outside of range of the Ultramarines' guns. Oh, they stayed at a respectful distance and did their best efforts to not seem intrusive, but, you know, nevertheless. You wouldn't want a repeat of Calth, now would you? Eventually, though, the Lion was given access to come down to the surface of Macragge, where Guilliman had organized an honor guard of some 47,000 troops, 9,000 Ultramarines, and the rest Planetary Defense Auxilia, the Imperial Army of the 500 Worlds. In fact, calling them PDF is misleading. They were as fine a fighting force as any Imperial Guard regiment, probably a hell of a lot finer as well. They were a true professional and excellent military. The Lion, however, came with the aim of demonstrating who was boss right from the get-go, as he brought down a large formation of Dark Angels who carried out a flawless military marching drill performance right there in front of not only tens of thousands of soldiers, but millions of civilians who had all come to see it. And from the way that it's described, it must have been a most stunning performance indeed. Dozens of squads moving in perfect interlocking formations, moving through each other, presenting various geometrical shapes, and all the while tossing and spinning their weapons even as they move. It was enough to even make Guilliman just a little bit annoyed at how good it was. And he had to admit to himself with, a certain amount of, distaste that they were only two brothers he had only really looked up to. And that was Horus, Lupercal, and the Lion. Indeed, Guilliman's even almost a little nervous about this encounter, as his senpai is here to see him, as he begins marching down the marble steps to make his way across the huge parade ground, kilometers long. That just seems inconvenient. Really, you're gonna walk a kilometer towards one another, just to speak. I mean, it's certainly epic, but nevertheless, I feel like a viewer of this show, I'd eventually be a little bit like, just run already. God damn it, get it over with. And just as Guilliman, self-conscious as he is halfway down the steps, he realizes that the bloody wolves are following him. His own bodyguards, the own cataphracti, disciplined as they are standing at the top, because this is a meeting between Primarchs. Yet the wolves of Fenris give no shit, and when Guilliman asks them, really? Seriously? He literally says that too. Like, I love that part where he just turns to them and goes like, really? And they go, yes. They have a little discussion and Guilliman calls them pains in the arse and they simply just respond, yeah, we are, thank you. And continue down the steps. I do love the space wolves, but even I am a little exasperated at their lack of finesse here. Oh, and to add to Guilliman's nervousness, moments before this, he received an encrypted Vox communique telling him to, as soon as the whole nonsense was over, hurry on over because you gotta take a look at this cliché, and to not, under any circumstances, make any deals with the Lion, binding deals at least, until he'd had taken a look at this. Oh yeah, that'll make Guilliman feel right at ease right there. Particularly also considering apparently the wolves and the dark angels have a special little ritual. After a disagreement, almost certainly started by the dark angels, let's be honest here. Don't get me wrong, the wolves will pick a fight, but the dark angels can be insufferable little shits. Anywho, whenever the two meet, they get to punch one another, apparently with their weapons, which seems unreasonable. And so the Lion simply says, come on, give me your best shot, and one of the wolves swings an axe at his face, which the Lion of course catches a millimeter or so from his skin, and then punches the wolf straight onto the ground with his armored gauntlet, undoubtedly doing considerable damage to the poor bastard's face as well. He does pull his punch so as to not kill the poor man, but this seems like an unnecessarily lethal greeting. Whatever nonsense has gone on between the two chapters must have been interesting indeed. The Lion too is on the offensive here, as when he meets Guilliman, he suddenly hugs him out of nowhere, which scares the shit out of poor Guilliman, who's like, huh, what? Human touchy-feely? What is this? To the point that he drops his helmet, which the Lion then stoops to pick up and hand back to him. Now, that is exactly the perfect little example of the Lion's innate abilities. That is a brilliant political/diplomatic maneuver. It makes Guilliman uncomfortable as all hell, asserting the Lion's dominance, and also allows him, in front of everybody else, to be seen as both brotherly, loving, and kind, whilst also making Guilliman look a little bit stiff, a little bit unprepared almost. I don't think the Lion necessarily planned for it to look like that, or for it to have that effect, but that is just the kind of thing he does, and the kind of thing that he does without really thinking about it, which is what makes him so bloody scary. The rest of the meeting goes on without any further incidents, and the Lion says that he would be most disappointed if he didn't get to see the Fortress of Hera. But he also says that Guilliman needs to tell him all about that fancy-ass light they followed here. Right, the worst bit of it then out of the way, we can move on from the greeting ceremonies. The two now just need to walk another few kilometers up to the Fortress of Hera, talking with one another every step of the way, when the Lion drops a rather interesting little revelation as well. Guilliman says that it was no accident the Lion showed up at Macragge. He had read the flight logs. The Dark Angels had been heading towards Macragge from the very beginning. The Lion had meant to come there. And Guilliman asks if the Lion thought that he had turned traitor, if he had joined Horus's ranks in betraying their father. The Lion simply laughs and says that he would never have believed something like that. He, in fact, believed that Guilliman would maybe do something far worse, and had already done something far worse. Somehow, the Lion has gotten wind of Imperium Secundus. Well, that'll be an interesting little thing to resolve, but we can't do that right away. First, we've got to take a little pop over to John Grammaticus, who is trying to infiltrate Macragge and is having a fair bit of success in doing so as well. And yes, he is definitely being hunted by the other Perpetual, it seems, who has decided to kill a bunch of bodyguards because, well, he was frustrated. Perhaps not the most convincing of reasons, but hey, if you're a 10,000-year-old demigod thing that was recruited off the beaches of Iwo Jima, I guess you might have a different view on how the world is supposed to work and so on. Anywho, John Grammaticus seeks refuge because he feels as if the Cabal is trying to flirt with him, trying to contact him and send him some silly-willy message. He wants to rest. And yet, the flirt attempts are more insistent than ever. He expects Slough Dar, the usually rather brutal taskmaster, to appear in front of him when he makes a mistake and stares into a mirror, but it is not Slough Dar. It is another Eldar, a tall, gaunt-looking Eldar, which seems like a superfluous thing. They're all tall and gaunt, but hey, again, details. And now I remember what the hell I was thinking about John Grammaticus turning cray-cray, because of course, it's the Fulgurite, the literal piece of solid lightning-y nonsense that the Emperor had apparently wielded, and there's a whole little short story surrounding this nonsense. And the Eldar, none other than Eldrad Ulthuan, the famous Farseer. Right, now John Grammaticus is getting really confused. Why would Eldrad Ulthuan be contacting him? And why would he be apparently working against the Cabal, against the Horus Gambit, the attempt to have humanity burn itself out and thus defeating chaos? Well, it seems as if Eldrad thinks that maybe, just maybe, humanity would be more useful as an ally rather than as a mere fire break, rather than as a pawn. Interesting. Ulthuan, or Eldrad Ulthuan more correctly, has always had a little bit of sympathies for humanity, though I didn't know they would reach quite this deep. That would explain a few other things, though it also makes me extra sad that 10,000 years later, he still hasn't figured out humanity to any real extent, to the point where he orders howling banshees to invade Terra and break into the Emperor's throne room. Remember that whole thing during the Saga of the Beast? Yes. Eldar diplomacy. A truly, genuinely remarkable thing. Oh, holy hells. But at least for now, Ulthuan is on the right side of history. No, Eldred. I shouldn't call him Ulthuan, because that's technically just the name of the craft world, after all. Now, as John Grammaticus points out, he is taking an enormous risk by showing up here in this form, this openly, as the Librarius is obviously in full working order once more. Eldred understands this, but he figures that a distraction is coming, and the Ultramarines, although they have already noticed the fleck, the acuity, in about 8 minutes' time, they're about to have something far more interesting to worry about, and he figures that'll take care of any lingering suspicion. Grammaticus then goes on his way, being allowed to do so by Eldred. Now, as for the more interesting thing, now this is a genuinely interesting thing as well, as a rift is torn in the warp in one of the major central libraries on Macragge. A warp rift. My, oh my, that certainly is sudden and certainly is interesting as well. Is this to be a demon invasion then? Another attempt at a calf by the word-bearers? Well, it is the word-bearers, but it is not another attempt at a calf, as out of the rift steps not an army, but instead first 2 word-bearers that have given themselves over to demons to become demon host, or, as the word-bearers are calling them these days, unburdened. That's a wonderful name too. Unburdened. See, this is the thing with the word-bearers, that I keep talking about quite often. The word bearers, Lorgar inherently has a need, an urge to be a subject. He requires something to be placed above him. And again, this is absolutely carried out again and again and again and again and again throughout the story. He needs something to place above him. He cannot be the master of his own destiny, because if he is, he will have to deal with all of the horrible shit he's done throughout his campaigns, throughout his revolt on his home world, throughout the crusade, etc. He will have to actually take a moral stance, and he refuses to do so. He doesn't want to do so because he fears that if he does, he'll come out as the villain. And the word bearers are the same. They too, they have to have something above them. And yet at the same time too, they view this, they see this, and they hate it. They really hate it. As we see, for example, through Argel Tal, blessed be his poor little departed soul, he really dislikes the fact that he knows this is a thing. Like, when he goes into the warp, he sees the truth, quote unquote, and he feels compelled to accept it. He has to accept the truth while still hating it every step of the way. And calling themselves stuff like the Unburdened is a way to, well, sidestep it again. They've made themselves the slaves of demons. They have bound themselves in fetters and shackles, fetters and shackles, more solid, more inescapable than any ever made from base metals, and yet they call themselves the Unburdened. God damn it. Word bearers. I tells ya, the word bearers be bad lads, yo. Bad lads. But besides these two unburdened, there is a third and far more interesting individual. Narek. Oh yes, Narek, the hunter from that very same short story where we first saw the Fulgurite. He has come looking for John Grammaticus, though perhaps not to kill him, as he apologizes profusely. He has been brought here by the magic of the two unburdened brothers who lambast him and lament his inability to embrace the real truth of the warp. Indeed, during the transit, when they were cutting their way with an anathema through the warp, Narek had insisted that his eyes be bound with a cloth, so that he could not possibly see the transit. And that is an interesting little point. So in the short story, Narek already, you can very clearly tell that he's one of those word bearers, one of those who is bound by the Legion to their current course of action. He is bound by his, shall we call it almost his programming as a word bearer, the weakness of Lorgar, and yet he hates it just as much as Argel Tal. Nay, more, really, he hates it even more than Argel Tal does. And yet, he was still a loyal son of Lorgar at that point. He hadn't figured out, well, an escape. He hadn't seen a way out of the bonds, out of the binds. Neither had Argel Tal, and that, of course, eventually cost him his life as he was backstabbed by Erebus, that little bastard. Narek, however, after coming to Macragge, lambasts his brothers. First, he's very apologetic. Oh no, you know, I'm very sorry. Yeah, you're right. I don't see the glory of the warp like you do. Apologies. I did need your magic to get me here and all that. Thank you for all of that. It's been a great help and stuff. And then he switches tone ever so slightly. Thank you so much for bringing me here with your unclean, filthy shit magic, you slaves of Lorgar, you traitorous sons of Horus. And before the two brothers can quite come around to, you're like, what? What are you saying here? In fact, one of them literally asks him, hold on. What are you saying? He shoots the first of them in the head. And swiftly proceeds to put another specialized bolt round in the head of the other one as well. Narek, it turns out, has very much so chosen his side in this civil war, and unlike poor, sad, unfortunate little Argyle, he has clearly managed to muster up the courage to make a good, solid decision on this. He's not just going to go along with the madness of Lorgar. He's going to take an active part in determining the destiny of his legion, as is made clear when he finishes his little series of insults by thanking the two brothers one more time. Thank you for your service to the loyal 17th. Now that's nice. Now that's very nice. See, I like Narek, and I'm very glad to see that he has woken up from the bullshit. He has become woketh. I couldn't resist. I really couldn't. It was too much of a layup slam dunk shot, you know? And hey, it's nice to use the term woke in a universe-ending horrible nonsense fashion, isn't it? Just occasionally, at least. I think Narek is gonna be one of my favorites awfully quickly. But we've got another fan favorite as well, do we not? The charred corpse that fell from orbit and then impacted on Magna Macragge Civitas like a goddamn warhead. Dolor has been tasked with finding the corpse and bringing it in for investigation. It was also Dolor who messaged Guilliman during the receival ceremony of the lion, asking him to come see this, you gotta come see this cliche, as quickly as possible. He repeats the you've gotta come see this about, I think, 5 times when he meets Guilliman as well, so clearly it is extraordinarily important, as Guilliman has to come see this very, 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 very incessantly, as everything turns out. They do talk a little bit about the lion as well, about whether or not Guilliman feels like he can trust him. How is the lion? Guilliman has his misgivings. Apparently, he has already come around to the idea that the lion has figured out what he's doing here, but pointedly, the lion has not asked him to explain himself, to pitch the idea, or anything like that. So Guilliman's kind of in the dark as to what the hell the lion's actually thinking. Has he come here to test me, to bring me in, to arrest me, to kill me, to join me? God Emperor only knows. Though, I suppose God Emperor's a little bit too early, isn't it? Anywho, Dolor then, after a little bit of whataboutism, waffly nonsense, and saying, you gotta see this again, brings Guilliman down into the depths of a Medicae area. Which Guilliman immediately reacts to, hold on, Medicae facility? The scorched earth that fell from the heavens was surely not in need of Medicae support, was he? Well, turns out he was. He's alive. Which, of course, Guilliman responds to quite violently as well. Like, what the hell? You pulling my leg here, Dolor? Did you drag me from the lion sitting there being like, are you a traitor, brother? All the way to see a living corpse? What absolute nonsense is this? Well, as Guilliman says, you do not heal from death, but no, you do as long as you are one of the Emperor's sons. It is indeed Vulcan. And Dolor makes it clear as well that, yeah, no, he was dead. You know, dead. The actual dead. No viable tissue whatsoever left on his body. No brain activity. No nothing. He was dead, all right. He was absolutely dead. And yet, then, eventually, he just was kinda not dead. Which certainly does sound more or less like what we've seen in Curse's little torture dungeon, where Curse killed Vulcan again and again, and then Vulcan came back again and again, pissing Curse off yet more and driving him well and truly over the edge into insanity. As you gotta remember too, Curse is entirely convinced that all of the other Primarchs are just as bad as him in every way, they just hide it better. And so when he kills Vulcan, and then Vulcan comes back alive again, that's kind of like seeing the worst of everything he sees the world being, just resurrecting again. And Vulcan would then still be a far nobler soul than he is. Curse can't even kill this noble soul. Yeah. That trigger-legged him quite thoroughly, it did. But for some mystifistical reason, read plot point, all of a sudden, Vulcan, when he landed on Macragge Civitas and was burned to death, has now gone completely and utterly insane, to the point that not only does he not recognize Guilliman, he does not recognize language even. Once they figured out who he was, they obviously tried to talk to him, but he only went like, "Rawr," and started hitting them, which they reacted poorly to, until they eventually put him inside of a reinforced chamber, which is able to hold Vulcan. Really? Really? This is the same bastard that literally used his fingers to claw his way out of a solid stone uvulette. But yeah, no, sure. You put him in a box and he's like, "Aw, the glass too thick." I'm being picky again, but come on. Anywho, he's now been driven insane to the point that when Guilliman goes like, "Brother," he just starts wailing away at the glass while screaming uncontrollably. So, I really dislike this, because I get it, the whole Fulgurite subplot, spoilers by the way, bit too late there. But I get it, I understand why they're doing this from a story perspective, absolutely, but really? It's not like he hasn't been burned to death before. In fact, Curse put him inside of one of his ship's engine blocks, basically, and then turned on the engine to be like, right, well, this surely has got to put the bastard down, right? No. It was just fine back again a little bit later. Yet this was the thing that finally killed him. Not being torn apart, not being stapled into a metal monstrosity, tearing apart his own sons, being shredded by a bolt of fire, being tied to the engines of a bloody starship, being stabbed by Curse 12 dozen times. None of that killed him or drove him insane, but a quip dip from orbit, and bearing in mind too, at this point Vulcan knows he's immortal. So even if he arrives in the upper atmosphere and he realizes, well, this gonna hurt, yo, he has escaped. He has escaped Curse's dungeon. All he needs to do is die, which he's already done, God knows only how many times, and then resurrect again, and he's fine. Yet again, that's... I'll just kind of keep talking myself in circles on this. Just accept the fact that Vulcan died and then went crazy because the plot demands that you be like, "Oh, poor Vulcan," for at least a little while. As we now move on to Conrad the Curse aboard the Dark Angel's flagship. Pointedly, Lion never informed Guilliman of the fact that he has a psychopathic mass-murdering monster aboard his ship, incidentally, because, you know, he had him contained until, of course, Curse gets a vision pointing him towards an airlock, which the vision is like, "Right, go over here. It'll break open quite easily, it's rusted, and then you can kill a bunch of dudes, and then you escaped. And voila, that's it." And goddammit, this is what annoys me, because I made the first video on Curse, then I made a second video on Curse, which was supposed to be more of an updated video, and God help me if I don't want to make a third video, because there are so many little things which I just can never quite cover all of them. For example, right here, it is made as an excellent point that Curse is guided by his visions. The visions are a way of manipulating Conrad Curse. He is sent a vision by the disgusting entities in the warp saying, "Hey, there's a hatch over here, you should go over there, and you could easily see how they would have used this strategy again and again and again and again to guide his actions, while also influencing him, and of course sending him the visions of a horrible future, which again was the future that he was going to create, and so on. Ah, that would have been an excellent point to bring up too. This is often why, by the way, I'm so hesitant to really get started on the Primarch videos, because god bloody damn it, their lore is scattered throughout dozens upon dozens upon dozens of books, and there's so many little details like these that are so very, very valuable that you just can't cover it all or write enough notes for it all. Conrad Kurz already has like a massive little text file document where I just not jot down random ass things to cover all the little notes I make on, and I mean, even then it's nowhere near enough. Ah, heavens. Anywho, Rusted Hatch, Conrad out. A Kills team of Dark Angels burst through the repair hatch. Now, his visions didn't tell him that, but it doesn't matter. They're just Astartes, he kills them easily enough. And whilst Kurz is busy slaughtering Dark Angels aboard the Lion's flagship, the Lion and Guilliman have a heart-to-heart conversation. Guilliman has a special room in the Fortress of Hera, where he has 21 seats surrounding a large granite table. The seats are arranged so that they have the banners of their legions draped across them, and pointedly, the banners of the traitors are still there as well. Guilliman explaining that he will keep them there just as he keeps the banners of the two lost sons, because they must be remembered. If nothing else, the fact that they were once loyal sons has to be represented. And of course the 21st seat is that of the Emperor. As for the two lost sons, theirs is marked with bleached white banners. Guilliman can be quite... how do I put it? Emotional? I suppose that's not entirely the correct word either. Well, he can be, far more than most of the rest of his brothers, really. But... sentimental. Yes, sentimental is a better term for it. He still believes that there might actually be a possibility that they could once all sit around this great table, and, as the Lion puts it, discuss the matters of empire. And there is certainly a matter of that sort to be discussed right now, as the Lion does indeed make it clear that yes, he has expected and seen Guilliman's ploy, and even names it Imperium Secundus. He accuses Guilliman of wanting to build an empire on the bones of the previous, to usurp power. Which is more or less what Guilliman had expected as well, and so he immediately corrects the Lion that he has no interest in becoming emperor. That is not what Imperium Secundus is about at all. It is about keeping the imperial dream alive, keeping the emperor's vision alive. It is not about his grandstanding. It is not about his advancement or his, well, empire, because as he says, he already has one. The 500 worlds. That's all he has ever wanted. That is all he is ever likely to want. That is his. The rest of the Imperium, however, his father's grand dream, is something separate from that. Something perhaps even greater than that. At the very least, it is something different. And he also states that he has no plans whatsoever of announcing himself as the new emperor, as the regent even, yes, regent is a more apt term, everything considering here, of the Imperium Secundus. Which of course leads the Lion to ask the next logical question. Dear Roboute, if you're not going to be regent, and it has to be one of the Emperor's sons, well, there's only two of us in this room. What exactly are you trying to say? And that is where we're suddenly cut off, because, well, We know what he's trying to say. We also know that he doesn't like saying it, as he says straight up to the lion's face that he does not. Well, he doesn't distrust him, but he certainly doesn't like the way he keeps secrets either. And of course, there's Dolor's warning to not make any binding compacts with the lion until he's given it a solid, thorough thinking over. Since there are now, of course, 2 other Primarchs on Macragge, though there's about to be 4. And clearly, either Guilliman did not make the offer, or, alternatively, the lion decided that he needed a bit of time to think it over. Because the next scene we have Guilliman and Titus Praeto, his chief of astropaths, discussing whether or not Praeto can have a quick little pop into the lion's mind and read his thoughts on the matter. Oh my, that is a, mighty brave thing to consider right there, since, of course, the mere fact that Guilliman has already reinstituted the Librarius will undoubtedly have raised some warning lights in the lion's mind. After all, he suspects Guilliman of wanting to build an Imperium Secundus on the bones of the first, to try and essentially overtake the old Imperium and replace it now that it is suffering from a insurrection. And having already recreated the Librarius, well, that in and of itself is of course not evidence of anything, but it does certainly suggest that if Guilliman is capable of doing something like that, going so brazenly English, against the wishes of the Emperor, for no matter how good the reason might be, well, that makes it clear that he is capable and willing to make his own path in matters where he does not agree. If, therefore, Titus is caught probing the lion's mind, yeah, that is going to cause a rather quick and immediate diplomatic incident, methinks. Though another, more severe diplomatic incident is already brewing high above in the Lion's flagship. I have to wonder why the Lion hadn't already returned to the flagship, as word of his brother's escape must certainly have reached him. I mean, imagine what kind of damage Conrad Kurz could do if left free upon a battle barge. Hell, bigger than a battle barge, the Lion's flagship had incredible destructive power, and Kurz made his way onto the bridge, of course. Again, I feel like the Lion should have gone like, really? He's out? God damn it. Right, I'll be right up there. But no, he instead goes to dinner with Guilliman, as they had agreed upon. Titus Praeto chilling nearby, which also, this lets us know that it's been hours and hours and hours at this point. It's night time now, by any chance, and again, the Lion's just like, oh, well, how much damage can he do? Well, Kurz figures out that the entire flagship is set up for a full-scale planetary assault. 400 drop pods loaded with Dark Angels on standby to descend down upon Magna Macragge Civitas. As a bit of a security measure, of course. The Lion is, again, thinking that Guilliman is trying to make his own empire, so, you know, a little bit of security is not anything to be criticized over much. Now, this is another retarded thing. So apparently, all of this has been ready and it can be launched with a simple biometric key from the Lion. A biometric key that can be produced via, for example, saliva. Conrad Kurz gets a hold of one of these biometric keypad, spits on it, and apparently this is enough to send the whole thing streaming down towards the city. Really? Like, I get it, they're brothers, etc. But really, Kurz's DNA is identical to the lion to the point where it can fool the biometric scanners? Again, bearing in mind, this is set up to launch an entire planetary scale invasion of Macragge. And the lion knew that Conrad was on his ship and was now loose. Really? Really? God damn it. That is so dumb. And even worse too is, the guilliman, Kurz spits on this pad whilst on the bridge, and then it goes like 30 seconds till full launch, and then Kurz somehow in 30 seconds makes it all the way from the bridge to the assault deck to occupy one of the drop pods. This entire scene is pure looks cool on paper. And so, of course, 400 drop pods start streaming down towards the surface, where Guilliman immediately is warned of this due to his sensory grid and goes, "Brother, what the fuck?" And the lion, panicking because he doesn't know what the hell's going on either, is like, "Oh god, this is a mistake. Please lower your shields. Don't shoot at my warriors." 400 drop pods. That's a lot of Dark Angels you could blow out of the sky there. Trust me, I had no plans of doing it. This is not my work. It's a mistake. And Titus Praeto gives a quick scan of his mind, which the lion allows, it would seem, because again, the lion would not allow psychic intrusion if he didn't want it. And yes, it is a mistake. After some initial hesitance, for bloody good reasons, Guilliman then lowers the shields and allows the pods to make controlled landings into Macragge Civitas. And clearly the lion has enough of a... And again, too, like, this is a drop that should take not a whole lot of time at all. These drop pods fall quick enough to befuddle anti-air weaponry, and clearly he's got enough of a Voxlig to call up and call off the attack as he informs all of the Dark Angels this is a mistake, don't come out fighting, surrender to the Ultramarines when requested to do so. And so they do. They try to park their pods as nicely as possible, but again, it's a drop pod. It has some guidance and steering capabilities, but they are certainly limited, and so they hammer into the city, undoubtedly doing a ton of damage to the infrastructure, to buildings, and probably killing a few people too, let's be fair here. But they emerge from their drop pods very apologetic and surrender themselves without any problems to the Ultramarines, apologizing as they do so, like, "I'm sorry, I seem to have parked my drop pod in your bath here, dear sir. Mucho apologizo." And of course, Kurz is one of them as well. He starts the day by slaughtering a squad of Ultramarines and tipping a Land Raider, because why not? Poor little, Grammaticus also feels the arrival of Conrad Kurz. He even touches his mind briefly and then starts yelling at the sky, "Please raise the shields." And hey, everything considered, 400 drop pods worth of Dark Angels for one Primarch, you know, kinda worth it, yet at the same time, that's a lot of Dark Angels too. Oh well. But Grammaticus, although he is able to sense the approach of the Primarch with his psychomancy poppy poppy puppy tappy, does not sense the approach of Narek, who introduces himself by jumping on top of him and kneeling gently on his spine. To be fair, Grammaticus was exhausted from the communion, so I'll let that one go, but the entire drop pod is so bullshit. Bullshit on so many levels. Bullshit on the lion not reacting at all to reports that Kurz was running rampant across his flagship. Bullshit that Kurz would be able to launch the entire attack by spitting on a goddamn data pad. And bullshit as well on him then making it all the way from the bridge to the drop pods in 30 bloody seconds. And again, I admit, the scene would undoubtedly look awesome in graphic novel format or movie or television show. It feels like it was written as a video game sequence, where they're just streaming through the upper atmosphere, leaving contrails behind, not one shit given about the fact that none of this makes any bloody sense. I'm not questioning the Lion setting up the assault, that's, you know, a guarantee. I'm just questioning all of the bullshit that was required to actually launch it. Anywho, we'll wrap up part 2 here with Narek kneeling ever so gentlemanly on top of John Grammaticus's spine, introducing himself like, "Hi there. I have come to have a little talk with you. Don't worry, I won't grind your spine into a pulp just yet. Trust me, I'm just here to talk." And hey, you probably kind of should trust him, because otherwise he'd just have shot him by now, wouldn't he? Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.